Hello there, it's Andrea Hollwegner, CEO of Health Stand Nutrition, and we are talking all things about children's nutrition today and picky eating. Now today I'm joined by a very special guest who is my videographer today, and behind the camera is my favorite little helper. It is Bring
Your Kid to Work Day.
And my son, who is just about to turn 8, is behind the camera here filming this very special segment on kids' nutrition. So we want to get right started because what I want to talk about today is some of the challenges that parents and caregivers can run into around kids that may be refusing meals or not really wanting to try new foods. And we've got a couple of helpful hints both from myself and my little helper behind the camera here that have worked well for us on a personal level, and of course what we know as registered dietitians are really important to help encourage healthy habits and get people and kids out of food jags and food ruts where they're just maybe not having enough variety and only want to have 5 foods a day or something like that. So if you felt frustrated, if you felt like a short order cook, if you are wondering what am I going to do to encourage my kids to eat more healthier options and branch out amongst their few favorite foods, this segment is for you. And what do you think, my helper behind the videographer camera there? Do you think kids can learn to like more than just a couple of foods?
Yes.
Absolutely. Lots of ways to do that.
Especially sushi.
Especially sushi. Yes, one of your favorites. What are your other favorite foods?
Ice cream.
Ice cream. We both share a love of chocolate. What's your favorite vegetable?
Definitely carrots.
Definitely carrots. And what are we growing in our garden this spring and summer?
Carrots.
Carrots and lettuce and peas and beans, all these sorts of things. So I want to dive into 4 tips specifically on what we can do if you're a parent struggling to figure this out. So number 1 in our 4 tips is take comfort that things are going to change. I remember years ago, before I became a parent, somebody gave me the best parenting advice that I thought was highly relevant to not only everyday parenting in any capacity, but certainly relevant when we talk about feeding kids and feeding families. And the advice is this: when things are going well, don't get too cocky and too like, oh yeah, we got it going on in our family, because you know what? That is going to change. Kids just ebb and flow with so much change and transition, and the same applies to sort of how willing and interested they are in trying new foods or branching out and not getting into a food jag where they only want to eat one particular thing as a favorite. So don't get too worried if things are going really well. But on the other hand, if things are not going well, again, don't fret. This will change as well. Things are always going to be in motion. That is the one thing that is constant with parenting. There's going to be some challenges, and there's going to be some times that, yes, you can pat yourself on the back and say, okay, we have a win here. What we also know is that when you think about all the adults in your life, there's maybe a handful of clients that we see, or maybe a handful of people in your network that maybe only want to eat 5 different foods, but certainly will eat a wide variety of kids that may not want to branch out and try new things. So take comfort in knowing they're probably going to progress and figure it out as they get older. This is a really common thing that we see with kids. So likes and dislikes are going to change just like the weather, just like your kids' emotions. Same thing when we think about foods. And in fact, sometimes kids need to try something 10 to 20 different times before they're actually going to approve of it. And what do you think behind the camera there? Are you thinking sometimes in order to like something new, you may need to practice it a little bit more than, once or twice? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. In our house, we have a rule that says 1
bite to be polite.
1 bite to be polite. That is what we're talking about when we're trying to think about exposing to new foods. So 10 or 20 times. So if you try a new particular item on the supper table 5 or 6 times and there's total meal refusal, don't give up so quickly. I know a lot of people try it once or twice and they think, oh, my kid won't eat that, and they never offer it again. This is the worst thing you could do. Continue to offer it, because it will occasionally occasionally get tried, and over time they just need to develop that comfort of seeing it multiple times before there may be an interest in even trying it. Number 2 is encourage visual and tactile learning. This is so key. In our home, we're always cooking up good things. What are some of our favorite things to cook?
Crepes.
Crepes, for sure. What do we like to do on Friday nights or Saturday nights sometimes?
Monkey around.
Monkey around in the kitchen, for sure. We like to make things like homemade pizzas and tacos and soups.
And make a mess.
And make a bit of a mess in the kitchen. And you know what? You bring up a great point. Making a mess is kind of part of the process. When we're talking about visual and tactile learning, kids learn so much through food and their ability to be part of either growing a vegetable garden, or maybe it's growing a little herb pot or a pot of lettuce or a pot of strawberries or whatever it might be on your small patio. Or bringing them to the farmer's market or grocery store and really getting them involved in pointing out what different things are, or asking them what we might want to try. And then what I'd encourage you to do to add that visual element again is get onto YouTube, get onto Pinterest or any kind of a social channel that provides a lot of beautiful food photography pictures that are friendly for kids. Teach them how food grows, teach them how things really look, and get them excited to want to create some things in the kitchen. I know what's so interesting, one of the top videos I've ever produced on YouTube isn't even a nice quality video, but it's a picture of me in Modesto, California in the almond orchards. And it's literally a little video showing how almonds grow and how they're harvested off the tree. So if you go onto our channel, Health Stand Nutrition, Chocoholic RD on YouTube, you can see, type in the shaker, and you're gonna see the machine that literally clamps on to the almond tree and then proceeds to shake the almonds off the tree. So apparently not just kids are interested in this sort of thing. We have thousands of people that have viewed this video because they found it really interesting to see how food actually grows. So if you haven't figured out like how do peanuts grow, what do almonds look like when they grow, how does a pineapple grow, I'd encourage you to pick a video of the day this summer and teach your kids a little bit more about how things grow. So fascinating for them to see. I'm always amazed when I've taught some kids nutrition that they don't actually know that carrots grow in the ground. And there's a green furry top on the top with all of the greenery, because the only carrots they've actually ever seen are like a grocery store bag of those little baby carrots that look like tiny little machine lathed bullets. And they have no concept of how a carrot actually looks, how it grows, and of course, how a good one really tastes coming right out of the ground with a little dirt on it, or from the farmer's market. So again, teach them where stuff comes from, get them some of those good fresh things. It's a game changer in getting them involved in the cooking, selection, and part of having fun in the kitchen. And as my little buddy behind the videographer says, you gotta get messy. So it's part of the process. Even young toddlers and kids can be involved in the food part. They're just probably going to be a little bit more up on the counter or right on the floor. Give them a cutting board and some green beans to look at as you're preparing, or a sweet potato. Give them one of those to look at and play with and explore as you're peeling one. So much opportunity, no matter what age we're talking about here, to get kids into the kitchen. Number 3 in our 4 parts of how to manage picky eating. Number 3 is provide structure with no pressure. I don't think any of us like to be pressured, and kids are no exception to the rule when we're, feeling a little anxious about something new. Really, at the end of the day, what we want to do here is provide enough structure that there's 3 square meals, there's small snacks in between, and that you're not a short order cook that if a meal gets refused, you somehow bring out their favorite. This is always going to get you into trouble. So provide some structure. If they totally refuse to eat what you've provided, then just say, that's okay, this will be here if you want to have this. But if not, we're not going to be having another meal or snack for several hours. Not in 10 minutes, several hours. And that way they know you mean business when it comes to talking about structure, that you're not just going to bring out their favorite food in 10 or 15 minutes because they didn't want to eat what was served tonight. Very, very key. One of, I would say, Canada and US top sort of feeding experts is Ellen Satter, and her approach to feeding has always so resonated with me. And she talks about the division of responsibility in feeding kids. And it goes like this. It's like parents' job is to decide what to eat, when to eat, where to eat, and really provide those key opportunities and some structure to how food is navigated, and to make sure that kids always know that food is going to be available and it's a predictable pattern, because kids don't like to be stressed if they don't know when food is coming or going. That isn't a good way to be raised. So really providing that structure of what, when, where is so key for parents. But here's kids' responsibility. Their responsibility in feeding is to decide how much they eat and even decide if they're going to eat at all. When we try to change up, forcing them to eat more or forcing them to eat less, we run into troubles here. What we want to do is really respect their ability to choose the quantity of what they're going to eat. This really allows just a really beautiful, respectful relationship in parents and kids, finding the happy balance between eating and, again, structure is the key. So number 4, to swallow or not to swallow, is a point I want to talk a little bit about when we're thinking about picky eating. One of my lovely dietitian colleagues, Shireen Sieben, pediatric dietitian, taught me something so valuable around feeding kids, and that is really kids need permission to have an out when they're really anxious or really crossing their arms and saying, I don't want to try that, or no way. The best thing that you can do is really take the pressure off and provide them with an out that if they put that particular food in their mouth, they don't necessarily have to swallow it. This is a game changer in trying to get kids to try some new things. And so what you might do is either encourage, you could even do a little demonstration, encourage them, you could put it in your mouth just to kind of taste what it tastes like or feel what the texture of that new food might look like. Give them permission to either just place it politely in a napkin and then put it on the side of their plate, or you can use what we call the no thank you bowl. And the no thank you bowl is where a particular food that's been tasted is placed. And you can put a napkin over top so it's a little more polite. So those are a couple of ways I know we make huge headways in giving kids an out so they don't have to 100% commit to fully swallowing a new food. I think sometimes as adults we take for granted that trying a new food is simply seeing it, swallowing it, and being done with it. But what we know, and certainly what dietitian Shireen Sieben has really taught me about that feeding relationship, is that feeding, there's a real stepwise progression in acceptance of new food. And especially if your kid's particularly worried about textures, or you found that they're particularly what we call a super taster, someone that experiences flavor in a much more profound way, really acknowledging that eating isn't simply eat it, swallow it, and all is good. There's the aspect of even a food being on a kid's plate and visually being on the plate, touching something else, or even having presence on the plate is the first aspect of a feeding step. Then we know we're going to be involved in aromatics. Some kids will like the smell of some things and maybe not on others. So they have to move through, tolerating the new aroma of a particular food. Third thing is, of course, taste. And taste is, first of all, going to be just acknowledging the taste within the mouth with no commitment, again, to swallow. And then the last thing, even before swallowing, is texture. Sometimes we just have to feel something very weird and new in our mouths and learn to tolerate that. And then, of course, the last, 5th progression is the actual swallow of that new food. So sometimes I think we, as adults, take for granted that whole process is one step, but it's actually 5 clear steps of sight, aroma, taste, texture, and swallowing. So some kids will progress through those phases really quickly, and others will take the 10 to 20 different times in order for things to actually move through that change. So don't give up. You're not totally alone in the journey if you're struggling with a picky eater at home. I'm hoping a couple of these ideas gave you a few new things that you could try, and I'm thinking maybe one of these 4 tips was maybe a better fit for you to begin on what you need to maybe try and do differently in your home. So I'd love to know in the comments what you thought of this segment. If you thought there was a couple of key things that you could use, let me know in the comments. What's one thing that you're going to do differently to try and navigate picky eating? And I'd love to hear from you as a parent or caregiver. What have you tried that's been working for you on how to move your little ones through just accepting new foods, trying new healthier options? Love to hear your tips and suggestions in the comments below. So I am signing off with my little helper on Bring Your Kids to Work Day. Any advice for kids, Mr. at the videographer camera there? What do you think?
One bite to be polite.
One bite to be polite. And he's even told kids this. Oh, if you don't want to try that, just one bite to be polite. And you can always have that no thank you bowl as a backup there. Is a great way to be. So thank you so much for having us. I'm signing off for now on this episode of AHTV.